Coming up on We Talk News this week, the U.S. Senate Banking Committee is meeting and taking testimony on the Safe Banking Act. Will it pass or won't it? Last Saturday, the streets of New York were filled with cannabis advocates and celebrities for the 50th annual Cannabis Parade. Just another day in the city that never sleeps, but are New Yorkers happy with the first set of changes to the New York State regulations? We'll have reaction from a cannabis attorney in the Big Apple. Plus, New Jersey gives operators a break on the dreaded 280E clause, but will it be enough to improve profit margins? And Maine rejects the opportunity to enter into an interstate agreement with other New England states. All that and more on We Talk News next.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to We Talk News for this week. I'm Pro Cannabis Media founder Jimmy Young, filling in for Alaina Pinto, who is on assignment and will be back next week. In the meantime, I will try to live up to her high standards. Now, 7 times the Safe Banking Act has already passed the U.S. House of Representatives over the past few years, but it never even got a hearing on a committee of U.S. senators. Well, that might change now, and it has, because on Thursday, the American Bankers Association urged senators that now is the time to pass the Safe Banking bill in a hearing. This was the scene in Washington, D.C. on Thursday for the Banking Committee's meeting with industry representatives. Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown is the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee. One of the people testifying at the hearing was the controversial Dr. Kevin Sabet from SAM, Smart Approaches to Marijuana. He continues to upset advocates and industry people alike with his self-serving agenda about the plant. The fact that of all the people the Senate committee could have talked to, I really don't think anyone in the industry would have been happy to see that Dr. Sabet was actually down there. Now, will it pass? Well, one person who is not optimistic at all is New York City-based cannabis attorney Jeffery Hoffman. He thinks this is all about politics, and the only Republican in the House that has passed or voted for the Safe Banking bill is Nancy Mace from South Carolina.
Respectfully agree with you. Yes, the House had passed it. It just happened to be controlled by the party that moves cannabis legislation every time they have. So if somehow Schumer gets something done at the Senate, I just don't see it now passing in the House. You missed that opportunity. And I think, frankly, that's the only reason the Republicans in the Senate are now doing it, because it's cover. They know they can do this now because they can do whatever they want. And in the bizarre chance that it actually goes to the House, Kevin McCarthy's got their back. It'll never come up for a vote, right?
I say at least they are talking about the Safe Banking bill in the Senate chambers. That's a good sign. Anyway, we'll have to see what happens, but we all in the industry are looking to get rid of that awful 280E clause, and if they can even deschedule the plant medicine, then the industry might be celebrating a huge win at the federal level. Still a long way to go. A little later on We Talk News here, I talked with Jeffery Hoffman about the changes to the cannabis laws in New York. In the meantime, let's find out more from our correspondent in the nation's capital, Andrew Berenger.
Thanks, Jimmy. Andrew Berenger here reporting from Washington, D.C. Now, just a recap. On May 11th, the Senate Banking Committee held its very first hearing to discuss the Safe Banking Act. Currently, there is a Safe Banking Act bill on the Senate side as well as the House side. It is the very first time that a bill has been introduced on both sides at the same time. Hopefully, that'll show a little bit more positive initiative and hopefully a better outcome than previously. Now, previously, the bill has been introduced in previous legislative sessions on both the Senate and the House side. There was a little bit more success on the House side, where it had passed in previous sessions a couple times. However, on the Senate side, the bill had never made it out of committee. Now, currently, the bills have a much stronger bipartisan support, and so hopefully a lot of people in the industry and other policymakers believe that have a much better chance of succeeding this time. Please stay tuned for a future report where we will be discussing this continuously until it hopefully passes. Back to you, Jimmy.
Now let's talk about New Jersey, where they have made some changes to their already existing laws, and it has to do with the dreaded 280E clause that all cannabis businesses face. That's the clause in the tax code that won't allow them to deduct regular business expenses that every other business has a right to do. These changes only pertain to the state of New Jersey taxes because, as you know, cannabis is still illegal federally. Our man in New Jersey is our own Rick Linney from Accounting Buds. He explains the changes in the state and why this is still significant.
As you mentioned, 280E is the most important piece of the tax code when it comes to a cannabis company, which is why the news this week here in New Jersey is of a gigantic nature. So New Jersey has decoupled from 280E, which in layman's terms means that here in New Jersey, the cannabis companies will be taxed the same as a normal company would be, a non-cannabis company, for their state taxes. It does not affect the federal taxes. On the federal level, 280E still exists even for New Jersey companies. But for companies here in New Jersey, they now, when they fill out their state taxes, they will be treated just like any other business here in the state of New Jersey. And I say it's significant because we've seen this happen in a few other states before. And on average, from what we've seen, the taxes that a company will pay in a state that has decoupled for their state taxes will be approximately half of what they paid had it not been decoupled, had they still had to follow 280E. And while that may sound shocking that the number is that big, keep in mind that many expenses such as labor and rent and things like that that a normal company can deduct on their taxes cannot be deducted for a cannabis company. So now when you're able to take those deductions, that will give you quite a big benefit on the taxes owed from the state side.
For the rest of the cannabis news out of New Jersey, here's Jill Goldsberry, who outlines the whole Curaleaf debacle in that garden state.
Good afternoon. I'm Jill Goldsberry, and this is We Talk News New Jersey. And here's what's going on in the Garden State. Just off the heels of the bigger story in New Jersey, multi-state operator Curaleaf Dispensary was recently granted the approval to continue adult use recreational sales in all of their New Jersey locations. This is just after regulators denied them approval of recreational sales on April 14th. And during this time, they were still allowed to operate as a medical dispensary, but without the commission's approval for an annual license for marijuana sales would have been halted severely at Curaleaf locations. And I think last Thursday was one of the biggest sale days pre the cannabis parade in New York City, which has been going on for the past 50 years, if you were there. Curaleaf has been in hot water previously, as early as last month, for their decision to temporarily close one of their grow facilities and inform employees that they were laid off that day. And this was also seen as a violation of regulations. This is considered a violation of rules for cannabis companies to operate in the state. So they were in hot water for that. But as of this Monday, the Cannabis Regulatory Commission did have a meeting on Monday to reconsider Curaleaf's applications for recreational marijuana cultivation and sales. Ultimately, they did renew 5 of the annual licenses for the company. However, there are some conditions they must demonstrate. One, they must demonstrate good faith bargaining with their employees and its activities and tactics. Secondly, they also need to provide documentation regarding the changes. And New Jersey operates with the info on, they want to operate with the info on their hiring processes and their specific criteria, which I'm not really sure what that means, but they need to have that all taken care of by June 1st, or they will receive a lot more penalties. And moving along to Elizabeth, New Jersey, I've got an inside story that the NAACP will be filing a lawsuit against the city, citing discriminatory practices by the council board president, Frank Mazza, the mayor, Bullwidge, the zoning board director of zoning, Eduardo Rodriguez, who allegedly are preventing a Black-owned dispensary, Cannabis, who I reported on last week, that's opening a dispensary from, they're preventing their resolution, which was previously attained during an appeal, but the city is refusing to comply with the order. We actually have audio from the latest hearing to share, which contains some testimony during a council hearing with Councilwoman at Large Patricia, Councilwoman at Large Patricia Perkins August, and her pro stance, while a fellow councilman, Galman, is speaking on his con stance based on why not to comply with the legally bound resolution. This will certainly be an ongoing story that we'll keep you informed of what's happening in Elizabeth, New Jersey. And I'm Jill Goldsberry with We Talk News. Thanks for watching.
Next up, the state of Missouri, where they are quickly becoming one of the top consumers of cannabis amongst new states. That makes our own Brandon Jones very happy. Here's his weekly Missouri Cannabis Report, sponsored by Baker Brands.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Brandon Jones from B Green Distribution with the Missouri Cannabis Report for We Talk News, sponsored by Baker Brands, my boys. And yeah, you might be able to notice I'm not in Kansas City anymore. I'm out here in Florida, family little vacation, workcation, checking out some people. And I can't believe I met an awesome gentleman down here that's actually taking my mother-in-law and my nephew fishing right now. Just got my first bluefish. He was in a horrible accident. He was a cannabis grower before, and he only was on opioids for 6 days after his accident. He actually had his foot come off of his leg, and they had to reattach it, redo part of his face. He's now deaf and now lost sight in one eye. Had to be in a wheelchair for 3 years until he could actually walk again, and is only on opioids for 6 days because of his use of cannabis. How do you find people like this? I don't know. We just talk, we interact, and it's just amazing how the world works. So even though I'm here in Florida, I just want to keep you up to date on the Missouri news as well. 350 million sold in 3 months. Insane. And I do have a little FOMO at the Regalia tomorrow night in Lake of the Ozarks. There is Mo Canna Fest, which is another huge and awesome event put on by great people down there. I know my boy Waxy Brown and the Artisans of Dank are all going to be down there. Dab Stars and just a few others. But if you're in the Lake of the Ozarks, you should get there. So I'm Brandon Jones with B Green Distribution, the Missouri Cannabis Report. We Talk News. Stay educated and medicated. Have a great week.
Brandon Jones, Missouri Cannabis Report is brought to you by Baker Brands, a curated B2B marketplace for head shops and dispensaries.
Now, one of the senators who grilled Kevin Sabet in the Senate safe banking hearing is John Fetterman from Pennsylvania. He challenged Kevin's premise about the dangers of cannabis and cited deaths caused by opioids, alcohol, and cigarettes, and none directly from cannabis.
I know, obviously, you oppose legalizing marijuana, and I presume because you believe that it's dangerous and it could result in a lot of deaths, right?
It's one reason.
Yeah. So how many annual deaths for alcohol use is called?
There are about 120,000 annual deaths for alcohol.
120,000.
Yeah.
We agree with that. That's actually about right. How many deaths does cigarettes have in America every year?
Yeah, still about 400-some thousand. Our legal drugs have kill many more people than our illegal ones, partly because they are fueled by a for-profit addictive industry that I know, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your work on this, fighting big tobacco for so long. Our legal drugs kill a lot of people because they're advertised and promoted in a system that
So in other words, though, alcohol and tobacco should be made illegal then?
Well, we're stuck with them because of their cultural, where they've been in
because it's addictive. It's addictive, and there's a lot of profits on that. And then also another question is that how many people have died of aspirin?
A few thousand a year, maybe.
3,000, yeah. Okay. So you were just talking about THA just a few earlier.
yeah.
So how many people have overdosed from death?
Well, overdose, there's a difference between overdose and overdose death. Overdose, we have probably hundreds of thousands of overdoses, not necessarily resulting in death. Tobacco doesn't provide an overdose.
Well, the answer is
death
zero.
either.
That's a lot
Tobacco
of words.
is also zero.
Zero.
Next up, the beautiful state of Arizona, where scientists there are working on an accurate breathalyzer for weed. Here's Karen Black with the Arizona Cannabis Report.
I'm Karen Black with Greenfinger Consulting. Welcome to the Arizona Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Scientists at Phoenix-based company Electrotech are working to create a marijuana breathalyzer that can detect impairment from THC. The company plans to bring the product to market in the next 2 to 4 years. It will first make the device available to medical marijuana patients to monitor themselves. Eventually, Electrotech plans to license the technology to law enforcement. The University of Arizona recently launched a new program, AZ Can, to increase awareness of and education around the responsible consumption of cannabis and to educate about the benefits and the dangers of marijuana. The program, still in its infancy, is part of the Comprehensive Pain and Addiction Center of the Health Sciences Division of the Tucson-based university, and it's funded through a $1 million grant from the Arizona Department of Health Services. Carmen Toma, the co-founder and face of Hippie Chicks, a popular Arizona edibles company, has left that organization after more than 6 years. Ms. Toma will remain in the cannabis industry and is developing plans for a new 100% female-owned company. That will do it for this week's Arizona Cannabis Report. I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting, reporting for Weed Talk News.
In Karen's state of Arizona, when they first voted in adult use in 2020, they moved very seamlessly from their medical program to their adult use program. They gave already existing medical licensed shops the first crack at opening for the adult public. Well, now New York wants to give a try by giving the already operating medical dispensaries called ROs, or registered operations, a new opportunity to thrive.
You can't be vertically integrated. You either have to be in the supply tier or in the retail tier. But these medical folks with their 3 adult use dispensaries are going to be able to be fully vertically integrated, grow the cannabis, process the cannabis, and then sell it at retail. And that's just a distinct advantage in the industry, right? You get to eat at each stop of the value chain, and you get to see if you're a grower, you get to see what the demand is at retail. So that helps you. And vice versa, right?
Give me another movement of regulations on here that either excites you or and makes you very upset.
Well, so let's go with the one you just mentioned. It appears that they're going to, so we always knew there was going to be on-site consumption. That is one of the licenses that exists in the law, in the cannabis law. It was, however, you may remember, I mentioned previously, those initial batches of regulations only had 7 of the 9 licenses in them.
Yep.
The on-site consumption was not one of the licenses that was in the original batch of regulations.
Gotcha.
In this new batch, they have released some additional information. In particular, the neatest thing I think there is, while there will absolutely be an on-site consumption lounge license, there's also going to be a temporary license. So if you're one of the other types of licensees, you can have a consumption event at your facility or your property. And I just think that's a really, really neat idea. Just this idea of having, kind of temporary event consumption licenses, right? I just think that's brilliant.
That idea of a one-day social license is being discussed as an option here in Massachusetts. However, the Cannabis Control Commission still hasn't figured out how to dole out social club licenses and the regulations that will be part of that. Now, just keep in mind, the regulators knew that this had to be set up because it was part of the original law that voters passed in 2016. In our Massachusetts report this week, sponsored by Holyoke Cannabis, the only real piece of news in the Bay State is the announcement by that controlled commission that delivery licenses and dispensaries will now be able to sell seeds and clones to the adult population. There will still be a limit on how many clones you can buy based on the 6 plant per adult regulation that has been in place in this state since the commission started. I can also share this little tidbit. The procannabismedia.com website will also be selling seeds. We're just working on some technical challenges with our website. We thank you for your patience.
Bay State Cannabis Report is supported by Holyoke Cannabis, Holyoke's finest cannabis recreational experience.
In Illinois, that cannabis market might have peaked since sales dropped for the second straight month. In the meantime, advocates are trying to get some of the regulations changed to make them more business friendly. Here's Cannabis Legalization News' Thomas Hauer.
What's going on? It's me, Tom from CannabisIndustryLawyer.com, here with a report on Illinois. The IDPFR has released April data from 2023. And what does that tell us from 2022? Sales in units are up. They went from 3.1 million 1 April ago in 2022 to almost 4 million in 2023. But the dollar amount only increased by about $100,000. So sales are somewhat flat. And then out-of-state sales have declined by almost $10 million, $9 million precisely, from the start of Missouri being able to offer cannabis legally in their state at cheaper prices with lower taxes. So has the Illinois market stalled out? Perhaps. They have sold more units, but they've sold only about the same amount of dollars, and they've lost $9 million to Missouri going legal. That's what's happening in Illinois cannabis. Back to you in the studio.
Needless to say, if the safe banking bill does get passed, cannabis stocks will increase in value overnight. Doug Miller has the pulse of Wall Street on his show, High on Wall Street. Here's his look at the publicly traded cannabis stocks.
Hello, everyone. I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's cannabis stock report for Weed Talk News. Safe Harbor, they announced a marijuana business banking partnership with Five Star Bank. No details were disclosed, but in a joint news release, Safe Harbor did say, backed by 5 banks' ability to dedicate up to $1 billion in deposit capacity through its relationship with Safe Harbor, cannabis businesses of all sizes will be afforded greater access to credit facilities along with a robust suite of cannabis banking services. Now let's go ahead and look at the stock charts. 5 Star is trading around $15.90. And it's at the bottom after all that banking fallout. So it could be a very good opportunity. It appears to be curling up. I have my eye on this one. And Safe Harbor, they're trading around 47 cents. And it could be dipping just a little bit more. But definitely watching for that little bit of pullback because it looks like it wants to bounce off the bottom. So keep your eye on that one. And Sunday is a very good friend and frequent guest of Pro Cannabis Media. And we all just want to congratulate her and continue that success because this is an awesome thing in the cannabis industry. And that's this week's cannabis stock report for Weed Talk News. I'm Doug Miller.
Okay, now let's head out to the mature markets on the West Coast. That includes Oregon, where according to our grower and advocate out there, Marianne Kersigi, that state is, quote, a hotbed of corruption and dysfunction. Here's Marianne.
I'm Marianne from Alibi with this week's Oregon Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Oregon continues to be a hotbed of corruption and dysfunction. The news of the second largest retail cannabis chain, LaModa, their ties to the ousted Secretary of State and other politicians continues to make headlines. Their poor business practices have tainted the industry and caused incalculable damage to the reputation of all cannabis businesses in Oregon. The 2 cannabis trade associations in Oregon, the Oregon Cannabis Association and the Cannabis Industry Association of Oregon, have both distanced themselves from LaModa. Another headline from the week is that Emerge Law Group failed to identify zoning restrictions for a cannabis transaction and had to pay nearly $5 million in a malpractice suit. And finally, cultivators are still scrambling to make sense of the new aspergillus testing requirements. The testing requirements have a 0 threshold and were not recommended by the Oregon Health Authority and have no scientific backing. That'll do it for the Oregon Report this week. I'm Marianne with Alibi for Weed Talk News.
Here at Pro Cannabis Media, we continue to provide reports from coast to coast in cannabis, and now we can finally say from Maine to Washington State. Our new Maine correspondent is the Doctor of Pharmacy, Stephen Ivanovski from Ogunquit. Now, earlier this week, I got a chance to talk with the so-called Dr. Beeline about Maine's failure to create an interstate commerce agreement with other New England states. I'm certainly happy to be filling in, and I'm also very happy to introduce you to a new member of the Weed Talk News team. His name is Dr. Stephen Ivanovski. I said it right finally. Okay, and he is a doctor of pharmacy from Ogunquit, Maine. Hi, Stephen. Thank you so much for joining us.
How you doing, Jimmy? Thank you so much for having me on today.
Terrific. Now, there's a story. There's a reason why we have you, not just to introduce you. The story is that a committee in the Maine legislature has rejected an opportunity to give their governor an opportunity to set up interstate commerce for the state of Maine. What was the reaction in the state of Maine when they find out that, oh, we thought we might have interstate commerce, but now it's just going to be delayed?
Yeah, so I think that's the key word there is delayed. There will be so basically it's been shut down for now. But there will be other mechanisms that they'll be able to push this through. And I'm sure that is going to be what is going to be happening. That absolutely will be the case. Yep.
No, that's great. We want that to be the case. We want things to work the right way in government. You do host a podcast called the Dr. Be Well podcast, correct?
Yes, sir.
See, I can read as well. Tell us a little bit about the podcast and why you do it and maybe some of the people you've had on.
Yeah, so the Dr. Be Well podcast is all about helping individuals, the community, and society as a whole do just that, be well. And cannabis is a big part of that. So we've had quite a few, cannabis professionals on the show so far. We've had Dana Brearley, who's the CEO of, the largest adult use, facility up here called East Coast Cannabis. We had him on, so definitely check out that episode. We had another cool episode on with a gentleman named Drew Patterson, who, we kind of talk about some of this legislation stuff. Drew is very, very plugged in with Portland. I'm currently communicating with him to see what's going on up there.
And finally tonight, an interesting story about one of the most successful high school football coaches in New England. His name is Jack Cochran, and he won 8 state championships in football with 3 different Connecticut high schools. Now, after getting out of coaching in 2012 for health reasons, he went into the restaurant business. And now he's got a cannabis delivery business that's licensed in that state. How did that happen? Well, a few years ago, he met a former player named Jordan Reed, who is a kind of an ex-NFL football player. And yes, it was one of Jack's players. Now, the former NFL player explained to the coach that he used cannabis for recovery after games for years. So now that Cochran has a license, he's going to hire 25 drivers and is making sure that those who are most impacted by the failed war on drugs will have an opportunity to work with him. This is another example of how the new cannabis industry should work. It helps those who were negatively affected by the failed war on drugs with opportunity for employment and advancement. That's Weed Talk News for this week. I'm the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, Jimmy Young, and yes, Alaina Pinto will be back next week. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly.
The Vermont Cannabis Report is supported by another Green Mountain business, Cannatrol, winner of High Times Best Dry Cure System. Check them out at cannatrols.com.
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore. So I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weegits filtration system. What? The Weedgets.com, Weedgets, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product.
Both cool the smoke from 1300 degrees to just 90 into your lungs. Plus, the maze pipe and pre-roll filters get rid of all the gunk that you just don't want in your lungs if you can help it.
Add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weedgets.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
We are a cultivation through to consumption lifestyle brand for the cannabis industry. Of course, the crown jewel in our product line is the Armoire home grow system. So now with Green Goddess Supply, we can take you everywhere from growing it in the Armoire right through to storing it, consuming it, rolling it, storing it, you name it, A to Z. Our goal is to enable everybody and anybody anywhere to be able to produce their own organic flower quickly, easily, discreetly, and inexpensively.
You would think that it is. However, there's quite a bit of debate right now in the accounting industry when it relates to cannabis with this exact question. I'm part of a few different networking groups that are solely accountants for cannabis companies. And there's been quite a bit of back and forth in those communities and discussion regarding whether 280E, if it went away, if the administration legalized cannabis or took it off of Schedule 1, what would happen? And it could go either way right now. The debate is it could make the accountant's life much easier. That's what a lot of the inexperienced accountants are saying right now, it seems, whereas the accountants that have been in this industry for a while and have gone through the same thing that happened with hemp a few years ago are saying that it actually will make lives more difficult, because when hemp became declassified a while back, the accounting became more complicated.
Safetiva Labs in Westfield is fast becoming the #1 testing lab for cannabis in Western Massachusetts. Safetiva understands the importance for accurate on-time test results for your product. That's why their current compliance panel turnaround time is less than 2 days. That's Safetiva Labs in Westfield. For more information, go to safetiva.com.